Hello, I'm Dr. Scott Behrens, Vice President of Enrollment Management and Student Success, and I am proud to bring you the 2022 Winter Enrollment Report. Let's get right to it. First, a huge congratulations to everyone. This is the first year in over a decade that we have had enrollment growth every single semester year over year. And we will start with the winter enrollment number. The official winter enrollment number is 2,381 students, and that is one up from last year of 2,380 students. So we are in the positive by one student officially. You'll see here I have now 11. Actually, that number has actually increased throughout the day, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But we have had increased enrollment by a student this semester, 11.2% in the fall and 46% this summer. So every single semester we have increased the enrollment of the college here. Now let's get into what that looks like in terms of comparing that with our local schools. And we find that Henry Ford is reporting so far that they will increase enrollment by 4.2%. Monroe County will stay relatively even. Schoolcraft, Washtenaw, Oakland, and Macomb are all reporting decreased enrollment, consistent with the state average of a decrease of about 2%. We are also seeing national declines throughout the nation, so this is consistent with what's going on, and we are bucking that trend. So that's great news. Now, one of the things I reported is that the enrollment continues to grow. That is not a normal phenomenon. Usually, enrollment actually declines due to student attrition for various reasons after the official count day. And our enrollment continues to increase. In fact, the official number as of today is 2,394 for a change of, it's actually closer to 0.5%. It rounds up to 1% with a relatively even, slightly positive number of billable credit hours. So that's all good news. Huge thanks to Kevin Cooper. We tried something last year where we added late start classes, and it did not help to increase enrollment after the start date. And the reason is because those classes were put into the schedule along with the other winter classes. And the sad part is that students immediately filled those classes first, putting off their semester, which was not the intent. So this semester, Kevin held off on opening those seats until the first day of classes, making those classes available and those seats available to students who came later in the process so that they could still continue to enroll and start their college careers. And it is working as students continue to fill those seats and enroll in the college. And we only did it with a couple of classes, but it is a great prototype for the future that some late start classes really enhance the enrollment and allow students who came late to the process to continue to enroll in college. So great work there. Let me get into the demographics of our numbers for this year. What we find is exactly what we expected to find. Our FIDIAC student enrollment is actually a little bit lower because last year we really capitalized on that Futures for Frontliners program, and in the winter and this past fall we capitalized and worked hard to get those Reconnect students in, and that's how we've really grown the enrollment of the college so far this year. But we have really capitalized on that to such a degree that there aren't a whole lot of students that we missed. In fact, we had a application rate that one of the highest in the state. I think it was second or third highest in the state, of over 10% of students who were eligible students in Monroe County, who were people who were eligible for Reconnect or Frontliners, actually signed up for it and got enrolled. So we did a great job there. And so we would expect a diminishing return, which is exactly what we see. And we see the same exact number with transfer as well. And that makes sense. Now, our continuing enrollment has increased, but it has increased proportionately to the fall enrollment numbers, which makes sense. So this is our job at keeping students into the system from fall to winter. Roughly that number is actually about 74% of fall students that we get enrolled for winter, and so that has been extremely consistent. With our returning students, we actually used those Futures for Frontliners last winter to get students enrolled by going back and calling our past students and past stop outs. And so that is what that represents here. Obviously, we've really capitalized using the Futures for Frontliners and the Reconnect in the past semester, so there's a diminishing return, but actually this is still a pretty good number of 206 this year. Now, this does not seem like a high proportion, but it will seem like much more as we delve into who these students are. I talked about Reconnect, Futures for Frontliners, and duals, and so we'll talk about that in a minute. Let's go here first, enrollment status, part-time versus full-time, and we see that 79.1% of our students this semester are part-time, whereas 20.9% are full-time. We actually had a slight reduction of full-time students, and this actually makes sense when you start analyzing who our students are now with the Reconnect and the Frontliners. But more than that, what's going on with COVID and the pandemic this particular semester. We saw a decrease in enrollment activity right with the announcement of Omicron and the concern about Omicron. And when we were calling these returning students and continuing students that hadn't enrolled and trying to get them in, one of the things we heard repeatedly, and remember, a lot of our students are older now because of Reconnect and because of Futures for Frontliners, we heard concern that their children who were going to schools in Monroe might need to be cared for if the school closed, and they needed to take less of a load to be available to their family members and their children. So this makes perfect sense in terms of the discussions we had with those students. Now, as we get to ethnicity, we see continual declines pretty much among every single ethnic group. And so how could that decline be? Well, it's not a decline, and actually this is a good theoretical discussion to have later on regarding our DEI. We have been doing a lot of work on campus with regards to education and learning about diversity, and I can't help but wonder that some of that education and learning is reflected in a more complex understanding about diversity and race. And now what you see is our students who are reporting as unknown has all of a sudden increased drastically from last year to this year. And our number of students reporting 2 or more races has increased as well. So that's just interesting. Good conversation for a later day, but it also makes figuring out who our students are much more complex. And so we're going to really need to assess where we want to go with our reporting and data on ethnicity in the very near future. Now, we talked about our Reconnect and Futures for Frontliners. If you recall last year, our average age of student went from 22 to 23.5. This year it has continued to increase by a little bit more than half a year to 24.2 years of age. And so we are finding that our student base is becoming older and more mature. And hence some of the issues that we're talking about when we talk about full part-time and decisions that our students are making and the concerns that they're having in mental health, and a lot of things in our strategic plan become even more important. So when we look at this, 28% of our students are dual enrollment students, 13 are Reconnect, and 11% are Futures for Frontliners. So 24% of our student population is on the Reconnect or Futures for Frontliners plan for tuition, which is a great thing. That means these students are not graduating with as much debt, hopefully, if they are utilizing this plan correctly and not taking out loans and so forth. But it should be pointed out that these students are still eligible for the same amount of loan money as they were eligible for before these programs took effect. So that's a concern to talk about in the future as well. There is your 2022 winter enrollment report. A lot more conversation to come, and thank you for listening. Have a great semester.